So I don't live off-grid. I live semi-off-grid, I suppose, but in a much more conventional house than Manda does, so hats off to her. During lockdown, a lot of our team here, we have 260 odd people who work in these two hotels. There were a lot of stress about housing, and it's been a problem in Cornwall for 40, 50 years, longer. And so I kind of looked around to see what was happening, and there are amazing people in Cornwall doing lots and lots of amazing things in housing and elsewhere. But what I realised is some of the most powerful people didn't know the problems because they live in really beautiful little villages or whatever, and they don't come across what the day-to-day housing struggles of lots of people. So I thought really hard about what I could do, and thought the best thing I can do is get them in the same room. So a while back, I think was it February?
Yep, and before, I think.
Yeah, maybe December as well. We just got a load of really big businesses in the room, all the heads of the councils, some politicians, some different people who are in positions of power in Cornwall, and then we got them face to face with lots of people who are currently homeless and trying to go to school or trying to live their lives, and just mix them all up and let them listen. And I think that had quite a powerful effect.
It really did. It really did.
That was down to those people telling their stories, which is really powerful. It wasn't really anything I did. I just had a room that was free.
That's bollocks.
So,
this is absolutely what we're talking about, the ability to stand up and deliver and suggest and invite change, even when it's amongst your own tribe. We're going to come back to that in a second. And I think what we're going to talk about now, I mean, I wrote that title some months ago, before this last week. And I think I just need to put fucking in front of everything all the way through the presentation. So we're seeing lots of big change. What we're talking about is the ability to stand up and work with that, and if possible, get in front of it. I'm going to talk through a couple of, first of all, this notion of sustainable. I'm not a big fan of that word, actually. Most of us don't live sustainable lives because we've got too much, and the rest of us don't live sustainable lives because we haven't got enough. And I think we need to acknowledge that, especially in the north and the west. So we need to put a big question mark over that. We'll come back to that. So I think the words that we should be using are restorative, regenerative, and redistributive. These are three words that Kate Raworth uses a lot in donor economics, and those are our touch points in terms of how we are living. But essentially, very quickly, this was something that was developed by Francesca Pick, great woman, in 2019. Again, needs a big F in front of each of those words. That's how she described our current environment. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think Truss must have read this or something and decided to ramp it up. And we're looking at this in the context of the three A words: affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. And that has come through a lot of the talks and sessions this morning, how we are engaging with that and what we understand those words to mean. I think, to me, it's about inclusivity and intersectionality. It's about honesty, integrity, not seeing a great deal of integrity at the moment. And accessibility is how able do we feel to connect to these ideas when in actual fact we are swimming in waters and working with people who don't engage with this at all. So this is about courage as well. So if we are in a state of great change and we have all of these, all of which have gone ballistic over the last few weeks, even month, and the last few days, then I think we can't be using this business as usual model anymore. And so Emma and I are going to talk through a few of the things that we think we might need for these sustainable lives. We're not going to talk about buying organic coffee or fair trade eggs or switching your lights off. We sort of hope that you've got all that shit already. This is about sort of a different sort of philosophical framework behind it all. So I think the first thing we want to look at really is this notion of collaboration. These are emperor penguins. And emperor penguins live in really, 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 really adverse circumstances. And the way they get to survive is when the very, very cold one on the outside gets to the point of being too cold to survive, they bring it into the middle where it's warm, and they scoop the warm one in the middle, we'll call the one Jeff. They move Jeff to the outside to take Wilbur's place. And that way they all survive in very adverse circumstances. And my question is constantly, if penguins can do this, what are we playing at? So really it's about the notion of complex systems, not linear. It's about whole system. It's about natural and social capital investment, not extraction. I think Dan talked about this notion of extractive before. It's a really important word. We're really good at extractive industries here in Cornwall, all sorts of extractive industries. And if we're not careful, our economic system is our next one. And it's about collaboration, not individualistic. Do you want to talk a little bit about your thinking around this, Emma, in terms of your work with housing?
So that penguin kind of cycle, we call sharing the shit in our house.
Yes.
Because it's about everybody should have a turn, and the problem we've got at the moment is actually some people aren't having a turn. I could think of a list of people I'd like to have a big turn, because they're overdue. So what I'm going to try and do, because Manda's got some great slides on systems, is I'm just going to, because I had never started any sort of charitable thing before, I'm going to try and share with you what I've learned, because I've gone up quite a learning curve, and all of you, I'm sure, are out there making a huge difference, but these are the things that I've come across. So the first thing is look at the big picture. The penguins have worked this out. The big picture is if they're all going to survive, they all need to share, because if anybody's left on the outside for too long, they're going to just die, and then they'll stop being warm, and then the next penguin in will get stuffed. And I see a lot of people who do really good things in charities who get bogged down in the detail, and they're arguing with other charities about a detail, or they're trying to compete within a little patch, and it's such a waste of effort. You've got to see the big picture and really don't worry about competition. You're not in competition, you're in collaboration, and that's a really key thing. When we first had the event here and I got all these mixed people together, I got some letters saying, and from really good people who are doing really great things, who just didn't understand what we were trying to do, and they were like, you're a hotelier, you know nothing about housing. What are you even doing? You're going to fail. Which could all be true, actually, but it doesn't stop you trying. And I think that the key for me is actually we need big picture. We can work together. We can do more together. We can all help each other. So that's it.
Absolutely. And as a wordsmith also, that notion of wealth is really, really important. It depends on how you define wealth. I feel incredibly wealthy, or I have what's called a low standard of living because of the income I generate, but I have an exceptionally high quality of life because I'm in charge of myself, and I have plenty of water and plenty of sun and plenty of space and plenty of autonomy. That is where wealth comes in. And this notion of collaborate, it's from co-labouring, it's just working together. All those old words, it's worth having another little look again. They can help us. The second big point for me is, and this is definitely a call to our creatives. I remember when there was a big event for creatives held at Eden a couple of years ago, we were just at the point of saying, the age of big is gone, and we need everybody to step up, and they shut us down because we didn't have enough time to talk about it. But it was a call out to the creatives to say, this is really something that we need to communicate really, really well and understand what it is we're communicating about and why. Why are we communicating in the first place? It's not about selling stuff. We heard that really, really clearly this morning from earlier. It's actually about sharing and inviting and inspiring and inciting. It's setting fire to something in people's bellies to make them think they can actually do something different. And it's about imagining better. The reason it's really important to imagine better is that unless we can imagine there's something that's worth moving towards, we won't try. It's a different way of thinking about hope. Hope isn't, as Rebecca Solnit says, sitting on the sofa with a lottery ticket, hoping it's going to win. She says hope is an axe that you break the door down with in an emergency. Active hope is having something that you think is worth fighting for. So this is why it's important to imagine. And the communication, either across the Coast network of collaborative, progressive tourism businesses that Emma was a badass pioneer of and has been for a long time, or whether it's about part of the Cafe Disruptive network where people are thinking about big disruptive ideas, or the badass Goodfest community here in Cornwall that welcomes the badass Goodfest community elsewhere. All it is about communication to make sure we can share that excitement. This is an example of small businesses, I'm sure there are many in this room, who have just decided that communicating and working with each other is a much better way of moving forward and understanding their own vulnerability, as the thing has come up already this morning, and then deciding how they can work collectively. And I think you've been working with so many partners on the housing campaign as well, haven't you?
Yeah, lots. I mean, and so inspiring and so humbling because it makes me realise I know nothing. But the one thing that I've learned through this, you have to offer inspiring alternatives because we are all trying to change the world. That's why you're in this room. You wouldn't bother turning up if not. So you've got soul already, which is fantastic. And how will we get the rest of people to come with us? They're scared. So many people are scared. I think lots of Conservatives are scared. We need to hold their hands. We've got to make people feel safe. And so that was one of the very early things that we wanted to try and do, was you have to create a safe space where people can have different opinions, but gradually move to a different place without feeling attacked. Because the psychology of change is if people feel under threat, they double down and they just look for the nearest weapon that they can fire back, and you don't get change. So change is about creating safe space where people can actually relax and be open enough to listen.
Absolutely, and it's also about being not too safe. Just safe enough that people can join you, and then unsafe enough to make them feel as if there's some movement and dynamism. A fantastic friend of mine a long time ago said to me once, be careful, but don't be too careful. Understand that there is good risk here, and our ability to re-understand risk and understand that what we're doing by delivering change can feel quite risky, but the place that Emma's talking about is safe enough to try, good enough to give it a go, and safe enough to try.
Safe enough so that you can have those uncomfortable conversations, which we're going to come on to.
Exactly. I think the third thing for me, which is one of my mothership fires in my belly, is having whatever the female equivalent is of having balls enough, there must be something other than ovaries, to be positively deviant, to deviate positively from the crowd. All of you here are positive deviants in one way or another. This extraordinary woman clocked it a long time ago, Angela Davis, when she said, I'm no longer accepting things I cannot change because we've been told to do that for a long time at school and at work and in our art class and our poetry class. Things I cannot accept are the things that I'm going to change. The notion of being positively deviant really is really, really important. It's about understanding that you are fed stories and narratives, and understanding that you have the right, and in fact the obligation, to challenge them and say, well, why? You're feeding me this, and I have never been given the opportunity to ask why, and maybe that's something I need to step into now. Don't ask for permission to do stuff better. Challenge the story. Maybe you're given a fantastic story, you think, yeah, actually I can get behind that, but bloody interrogate it first and give yourself the authority to act, assuming you can. I told my kids a long time ago, never do anything just because somebody else tells you to, especially if they're wearing a uniform. Now, they might have a really good idea, but understand why they are asking or telling you before you acquiesce. Do not acquiesce. Say, yeah, actually, no, that's a really good idea not to cross the road right now. I think I'll go with that plan. Or, no, you're telling me I can't protest against something that's clearly inequitable and ecologically destructive. What? No, I'm not going to acquiesce to this request. So assume we have that authority to act, and do be positively deviant. Emma has been positively deviant for years, working in this sector, in this place, in this community, in a sector locally and nationally and internationally, and it's hard. It's hard work sometimes, isn't it? You break things.
It's scary, yeah. When we designed Scarlet, we wanted to challenge all the concepts of luxury hotels. You know, they have too many towels, they try and kill you with the food, they try and kill you with the chocolates on the pillow. It's all about excess and ostentation, and we tried to pare it back and say, well, we're not going to do any of this. We're going to be something that's really simple and understated. And, you know, we went with a builder that had never built a hotel before, because it was an eco builder from Germany, because they couldn't do the standards at the time in the UK. I think they're getting there now. We went with architects who'd never built a hotel, and we had no idea what we were doing, and it nearly bankrupted us. But we did it. But the number of times I sat in meetings with engineers, and they were going, you can't do this. And we were like, you know what, we've come in this far, hell, let's die trying. And I think sometimes you have to be prepared. I don't want any of you to go out and risk your house or your home.
Well, not everybody.
But you know, sometimes you just have to go for it. And as long as you can see, so we worked a lot on the worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario? We'll probably still have a house over our heads. So isn't that better than not doing what you believe in?
Absolutely. And I think the notion of transgressive thinking and rule breaking has come about over the last few years with the onset of some well-known papers that were written about climate, as well as XR and Fridays for Future, saying actually we need to start rattling the cages of our minds a bit more now. So when I talk about rule breaking, I don't necessarily mean marching out and gluing yourself to shit, although by all means, if that urge takes you, then please do. It's really about challenging what you think and what you presume and what you've been told and what is happening in your place, and understand that in actual fact maybe there's room. And for creatives, you're constantly breaking the rules. In fact, XR is a case in point. They broke all the rules about how you communicate. They use caps. You're really not supposed to use caps in communication. You're really not supposed to use all the colours that they used. You're really not supposed to use phrases like heading for extinction or we're fucked, but they did. Now, obviously that didn't work with a lot of people, but it worked with so many. We saw now thousands on the street that had never been there before. So challenge your expectations. The most innovative designers consciously reject the standard option box and cultivate an appetite for thinking wrong. If somebody is telling you that what you're doing isn't right for that time and place, it's definitely worth asking why. You might have got it wrong, but credit to you for trying. You might have got it right, and it will be worth trying. Because otherwise, actually this one, again, this is a very old picture. It sort of makes a lot of sense right now, actually. And we're just watching them do it. So instead of doing that, what we really need to be doing as part of this is the notion of critical thinking. I spoke to some master students recently who told me, and I did twitch a bit, that they didn't like critical thinking and they didn't understand what it meant. And thinking, whoa, you just finished a master's. That's the whole point of a master's. The point of critical thinking is not to critique. Well, indeed, I was polite but sort of gobsmacked. The point is to ask why and to think about what you're being given and to see how it fits, and maybe it doesn't fit. Because if you don't, then we're looking at walking over a cliff. And there are three things I just want to talk about quickly here. One is, we've already talked about comfort and uncomfortableness. Discomfort is a gift. Too much comfort leads to complacency and is not delivering change. We only move when it becomes more uncomfortable to stay than to change. We are in that moment of critical transition now. The discomfort we are feeling politically and economically, in terms of health, in terms of our systems, this is literally the fire under our arse that we need. So welcome discomfort. It can encourage brave thinking. Secondly, interrogation of power. Everything that we've been talking about has got to do with power. All the sessions this morning. And when you're ever in a room, ask yourself where the power lies. It might lie more with yourself than you realise, and you need to acknowledge that and see if it needs to be distributed or step up to it. Or it might lie somewhere else and it's not in the room. So think very carefully about who is in charge of what. Comes back to, again, that cattle prod of thinking, of challenging. And sorting out a deep misunderstanding about limits. This drives me nuts. The donut economics space that Kate Raworth developed talks about planetary boundaries, and we are crashing through those willy-nilly with a level of cavalier carelessness that is absolutely shocking. But you ask somebody if they'll challenge their MP or challenge something at work, or maybe think about not doing something that all of their friends are doing. Those are limits that we think are far too important not to cross, where those are exactly the rules we should be breaking. And understanding that the limits, if you like, going back to the passenger and the crew that Dan was talking about, the limits of actually keeping the ship on the move are the ones that we need to be living inside. So we need to rethink what we understand about limits.
Yeah. So on discomfort, I don't know about everybody here, but it keeps me awake every night. Every night I'm struggling, thinking, geez, I'm getting old now. I need to make every day count. What should I be doing? What should I be doing? I could, do you know what I mean, sell up and give some money that isn't owed to the bank, to charity. How do I spend the rest of my life if we really want to make it count? Because in the end, we all need to put food on the table and have a roof over our heads. And then it's about, what the hell are you going to do that actually matters? And that's a question I ask a lot of people, particularly if I'm talking to bankers and stuff, and I say, oh, so what do you do? And then I say, what do you do that matters? And I think that it's that discomfort. You have to welcome that, because if you are feeling discomfort right now, it is because you have got empathy, and then you are bloody lucky, because so many people in this world do not have empathy. They don't care about people who are going hungry. They don't care about animals dying or the climate. So pain is something you get because you are lucky, because you've got empathy, and we have the power to change stuff, and that is such an exciting thing to do, and we have to use all the tools in the box to get people into that space. And the more different they are from me, the more I'm unable to bring them on board with just camaraderie, and so I resort to ego sort of manipulation and using silence. So I kind of say, so what can you do to help? And eventually, they normally go, well, what do you want me to do? And it's like hours or money. And it's hard, isn't it? Because every night I go to bed thinking, why am I so wound up? Why do I never relax? Why am I always just thinking about every day? And I know Manda's the same, and probably nearly everybody in this room is the same. How do you cope with life and then the struggle that the world has got, and actually do something that is worthwhile? But you just have, I think that it's just a privilege to live with that pain, because it's trivial compared with the pain that other people are going through.
I think that's spot on, actually. If you're feeling something and you haven't been anaesthetised, we heard from in that fantastic poem that we are suffering from our own numbness, then I think the fact that you are feeling something, it's a bit like losing somebody, and the grief is an indication of how much you love them, and then therefore how much they felt loved. So I think it's a really good sign. And it can, as I say, and as Emma's just pointed out, it can actually encourage action that might not have happened before. Part of this numbness is to do with the stories that we absorb. And I just want to talk to you about a guy called Marshall McLuhan, who said quite extraordinarily and spot on, he said, we don't know who it was that discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't a fish. And what he meant by that is we do not even see or feel the water we swim in. It just becomes a temperature and a consistency that we get used to. And then it becomes a cultural paradigm, and we stop seeing it. And if you don't see it, you don't question it. So part of this is acknowledging that we all swim in different waters, and there are all sorts of stories that we are given. And it's really, really important. If everybody here got what we heard before in terms of investment is super, super important, and it is true. That if you change where your money is, it can have 21 times the size of changing your diet, changing your, I think it's your energy provider and your transport modes. It's massively important. Anybody here got Wi-Fi up on their phones right now? Have a little look at bank.green. I would invite anybody to look. Over the next 30 seconds, look at bank.green. And it's one of those, don't feel shocked if it's bad news. You can just type in the name of your bank and it will tell you whether it's a happy green face or a really alarming red face. That is the superpower that it's a massively important tool, because you can go away from here today and immediately start something that means all of that money in your bank is not investing in all the things that we don't like. You're seeing the water you swim in, you've been told all this stuff, or having some of it not talked about, and you can actually put it in the good stuff. So it's a double whammy of not doing the bad stuff and doing the good stuff. And then you can tell somebody else. And it's incredibly important. Think about the water that we swim in and assume that you have that authority to ask. Fourthly, and this is something that Emma does a lot, and it's something that sort of my long-suffering partner knows, that my head is a bit like the insides of a washing machine. But it's a fantastic place to live, because it's all about how everything is connected all the time. And it's about systems thinking, not linear, reductionist bollocks that tends to come out of either the neoclassical economic paradigm or the way we just think the world is run. This is actually about understanding things like it's not about the individual parts, it's about the whole. It's not about linear thinking, it's about non-linear and how it can be a bit swirly and confusing, unpredictable, but can lead to amazing places. It's about understanding that we bring it together in a synthesis, not fragment it into fractured spots of analysis. It's about processes, not structures. It's about networks, not hierarchies. Does anybody in this room feel more important than anybody else right now? Or do we actually feel we're part of a network that is much bigger than even the people in this room? And it's about relationships, not objects. We have been taught to think like this, and because it's the water that we swim in, we've never even noticed it. Next time you listen to the radio, ideally Radio 4, talking about economics, and they give you the economic forecast, the economic news. Just listen to how they frame the economic news, and they will use things like bad news is Marks and Sparks, you know, they're not growing as fast, and the good news is Tesco have made a great profit. Hold it, I'll decide if that's good or bad. Thanks very much indeed for the help there. Not. But you're given all this, and so you're pulled into a space where you are then now taught, without even knowing you're learning this, that growth is good. Infinite growth on a finite planet is clearly, in terms of physics, preposterous and goes against first, second and third law of thermodynamics, for God's sake. It's utterly ridiculous. And we're told that degrowth, which has been doing the rounds for 10, 15 years even, is quite weird. It was really great to hear just now that maybe some people are starting to engage with it. It doesn't mean an inability to thrive, it's the opposite. It's about whether we want better as opposed to bigger.
Yeah, well, only that I think a lot of systems are broken. I mean, that's my conclusion from 9 months of research on the housing market. The whole system is fucked. And we need to be prepared to break the system. So that's now what I'm kind of switching my attention to, is really to get long-term solutions. We've got to take it right down. And that goes to ownership. There needs to be swathes of redistribution of land, because whilst all the people who own lots of land are hanging on to it, they're not going to give it up. So, you know, we need to go and have the conversation with the landowners, which is exactly what we're doing. And you know what? They're reasonable people, a lot of them. And they're going, you know what? I feel really uncomfortable with my 9,000 acres. And we're starting to have those conversations. But we've also got to have the conversations with the planners to say, by the way, we don't want conventional buildings here, because who wants to live in a box? So we've got to reimagine schemes, and that's going to take some time. But that's, you know, and that's what's exciting. But don't be afraid of challenging the fact that the system needs changing, because everywhere I look, I think systems need changing.
Absolutely. Some of the systems are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is what we heard earlier. That's what they were set out to do, but some of them are clearly broken. Have a little look at what Ken Robinson has got to say about the way we're educated. He talks about creativity and having original ideas and divergent thinking. Really brilliant. It's an RSA animate. He's on the nail. It's a real loss that he died, I think, about 18 months ago. Cracking guy. RSA animate, really brilliant. And just moving up to our fifth point, understand the importance of imagining. If you look at what Rob Hopkins is doing in terms of imagining better, and he pits the hippocampus, which is a bit of our head, which enables us to understand what has come and imagine something ahead of us, as opposed to the amygdala, which is a little tiny almond-shaped bit at the bottom of the reptilian part of our brain, which is fed by fear. And alarmingly, the more scared you are, the bigger, like physically bigger, the amygdala gets. So it feeds off fear, and it makes you respond with fear. Now, there's a healthy fear that enables you to think about whether what you're doing is dangerous or not. But we don't need to be driven by that, we need to be driven by the hippocampus. So the imagining better is utterly, utterly crucial. Have a little look at what Rob Hopkins is doing there. So essentially, the fifth point is, if we want that to happen, if we want to deliver massive change with the people that we are, we just need to understand a couple of things. One is, the example that Emma has set and is setting in all of her work, and all of you, is crucial. It's not just about doing the thing, it's actually about enabling other people to see it and feel how they can get involved. It's about making that change contagious. There's a brilliant guy called Douglas Rushkoff, that Dan reminds me of a little bit actually, who said at a fantastic talk that he gave in London a couple of years ago, at the end of it, he says, if you want to deliver some really, really, really good change, you need to do it and then talk about it. He said, essentially, don't do it by yourself, understand the role of being positively deviant, but then find your tribe, go and find the others. And then he said, go and find the other others. Find the people that you haven't found a way of making a connection with yet. All the people that Emma's been talking to about housing who live here, maybe they've lived here for generations, but they haven't seen the poverty. Find ways of connecting to them, even if you just need to march into the office and say we're going to have a chat. But find ways of developing that connection, because that is where you're starting to see massive exponential shift and change. So essentially, remember the penguins, communicate by nature. We need to challenge the narrative. We need to stop thinking in straight lines. And we need to make change contagious. And as Dan said earlier, this is the work of our times. Right here, right now. So.
And it's exciting, because you know what? I keep being told that Britain has turned tribal, and we're in our tribes, and we're not going to get out of our tribes. And the fact is actually, I believe in the generosity of people, and all you have to do to get somebody to move tribes is have a sexier and more fun tribe than the people over there. And so for most tribes, that's pretty easy. And the other thing that I think is really exciting is that our banker friends were talking about shareholder gains. I reckon there's a huge opportunity in giving shareholders fun, in giving them belonging. And it's about time we started looking at those as part of the dividend of investing in a company. Because I think, who wouldn't want to have shares in something like, well, not that they're available now, Patagonia, but especially if there's a party involved or there's some lovely thing that you do and you can feel good about yourself, there are lots of things that people value, and all you have to do to get people wanting to come on board to help you with whatever project you're trying is to make it fun, to make it feel like you're going to have a good time, you're going to feel good about yourself, you're doing something that is rewarding the planet. It's got to be fun, because then you'll find people rushing to join you. And then you just need to have one person who's not trying to deal with all the emails. But I'm sure that you're all doing brilliant things, and I hope you go off and do far, far more brilliant things than I'll ever achieve. But it's about having fun while you're doing it, because life's too short otherwise.
It is, and also a little bit dangerous. Thank you very much indeed.